Hello and welcome to another TLDR US video. The Supreme Court of the United States has been heavily politicized in recent years, and with the high-profile cases on the horizon, and some Supreme Court firsts recently, we thought it would be a good time to highlight not only the importance of the court, but also some of the cases we can expect to see decided in the next few months. If you haven't already, please consider subscribing to the channel, and hitting the bell icon means that you'll be notified every time we post. Before we get into specific cases, let's look at the role that the court plays in US government. Article 3, Section 1 of the US Constitution states, "The judicial power of the United States shall be vested in one Supreme Court, and in such inferior courts as the Congress may from time to time ordain and establish." As you can see, the Supreme Court is the only court specifically established by the Constitution, and it leaves the other courts to Congress to establish. So what does the court actually do? Well, it's worth noting here that a case doesn't usually begin in the Supreme Court. While there are some circumstances in which the court has original jurisdiction, that is, the right to hear a case for the first time, cases usually make their way through the federal court system before reaching the Supreme Court. And even then, they must get the approval of at least 4 of the court's 9 judges. Theoretically, the court remains independent of the political influence of the other 2 branches of government. However, if the disputes over the nominations of Merrick Garland and Brett Kavanaugh have taught us anything, is that the court's apolitical role is not as stable these days. The court has some very high-profile cases that it could make decisions on in this term. 2 of those cases, Chiafalo v. Washington and Colorado Department of State v. Barsa, are regarding electors in the states who preferred to cast their electoral votes for candidates other than Hillary Clinton, who won the popular vote in both states. However, state law in both states requires electors to cast their votes in accordance with the popular vote of the state. Whether or not to abolish the Electoral College has been a rather hot topic in American politics, particularly after the elections where the winner of the Electoral College actually got fewer votes in the public vote. And these 2 cases, coming to the Supreme Court, could have very obvious consequences on the upcoming presidential election. President Trump's tax returns have also garnered the attention of the court. Democrats in the House subpoenaed his tax returns and other financial documents, while the president's lawyers contend that lawmakers don't have a legitimate legislative purpose for wanting the documents. As such, the Supreme Court could hand President Trump or the House Democrats a major political victory. Now, the Supreme Court has long held a certain mystique about its inner workings, and this is due, at least in part, to the refusal of the court to allow cameras in the courtroom during proceedings. Also, while the court began recording proceedings in 1955, these recordings have never been accessible in real time. But in a time when pandemic has forced the world to adjust rapidly in changing circumstances, the court has certainly not been immune to this effect. As a result, the court began meeting via teleconferencing and, for the first time in history, allowed its proceedings to be live-streamed. Now, given the social distancing that all of us have been practicing in an attempt to curb the spread of coronavirus, teleconferencing is something that a lot of us have had to get used to. But on Thursday, it took a bit of a humorous turn, when a toilet was heard flushing for the first time in Supreme Court history, though it was unclear where the sound was coming from on the call. So, at very least, it added a bit of humour to a difficult situation, and I guess this proves that there are some consequences of allowing proceedings to be live-streamed. Anyway, the court's politicisation has been somewhat compounded by the declining health of Ruth Bader Ginsburg. The 87-year-old justice has had some pretty severe health scares in her tenure, including surgical procedures for 3 different types of cancers. Last week it was reported that she once again had to be hospitalised due to a gallbladder infection, though she continued to work from her hospital bed because, as we mentioned earlier, the court was meeting via teleconferencing. Democrats fear that Ginsburg's declining health could give President Trump a rare 3rd appointment to the Supreme Court before the end of his first term. By comparison, Obama, Bush and Clinton only had 2 appointments over their 2 terms as president, which means that Trump's numerous appointments could fundamentally affect the court's future. Now, you may be asking, what difference does it make if President Trump gets another appointment to the court? Well, as we said earlier, the court has 9 justices. Of those 9, 5 of them were appointed by Republicans: Clarence Thomas by George H.W. Bush, John Roberts and Samuel Alito by George W. Bush, and then Neil Gorsuch and Brett Kavanaugh by Donald Trump. The other 4 were all selected by Democrats, with Ruth Bader Ginsburg and Stephen Breyer chosen by Clinton, and Sonia Sotomayor and Eleanor Kagan appointed by Obama. Because of that, the court does have a 5-4 conservative majority. That means that a third Trump appointment to replace Justice Ginsburg would shift that to a 6-3 majority. Now, you all know that at TLDR we strive to be as unbiased as possible, so we're not saying that a conservative shift in the court is a good or bad thing, but it does appear that the court will be more partisan after the change. Anyway, that's how the system works at the moment, and we're merely pointing out the impact of President Trump's possible replacement of Ginsburg, and how it could make the court even more political. Now, it's worth pointing out that just because a Republican or a Democrat appoints a justice doesn't mean that the justice will be a constant vote for that side. In fact, Chief Justice John Roberts is one such example. Appointed in 2005 by George W. Bush to fill in the position of then-late Chief Justice Rehnquist, who passed away from complications due to thyroid cancer, Roberts was considered a moderately conservative jurist. However, the Supreme Court heard a challenge to the Affordable Care Act, more commonly known as Obamacare. The Act contained an individual mandate, meaning that it required Americans to obtain health coverage or pay a fine. It was quite surprising to many when Roberts voted with his 4 Liberal colleagues to uphold the mandate. Though, on the whole, as you can see, the court's role has been politicised. In fact, John Roberts has been surprisingly vocal about trying to protect the court's apolitical image. For example, in a rare move from a normally very reserved Chief Justice, Roberts expressed his disapproval for President Trump referencing one particular federal judge as an Obama judge. In his statement, Roberts defended the work of federal judges, saying, "We do not have Obama judges or Trump judges, Bush judges or Clinton judges. What we have is an extraordinary group of dedicated judges doing their level best to do equal right to those appearing before them." The court's efforts to remain apolitical may also be why justices have thus far resisted permitting cameras inside the courtroom during proceedings. Some fear that cameras in the court's proceedings would only increase the politicisation of the court, turning questions and answers of the court's deliberations into video soundbites lacking context for the 2 parties to use as political ammunition. Anyway, high-profile rulings don't usually come out until June and July, so we still have a while for coronavirus to play out and for the live streaming to continue before we get to any major cases. Of course, we'll let you know how these 2 major cases we mentioned earlier end up turning out. So don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell icon to be notified whenever we release a new video. Between now and then though, we'd like to know what you think about this issue. Do you think the Supreme Court should be less political, or do you think the current system works well? Would you be concerned to see Trump elect another judge, or should the president choosing judges not matter? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below, and you can get involved in the conversation over on the TLDR News Discord server. It's linked down below. Special thanks to our Patreon backers who make videos like this one possible.